sometimes people do not even bother changing default device passwords. When I buy a device, there will be when you buy a device, there will be some default passwords that are set in, and you do not even change it. It is absolutely critical that all default accounts passwords get changed or disabled when devices are put on the field. Now, this is an interesting site which gives you for each vendor, each model, each version, each access type, the username and password with all the privileges and with some notes. So, it is a very interesting site, the Phenolit us.org. You can go and find out for every device that you, many of the devices you purchase which goes on the network, you can find the default username and password. So, many times many installations do not change these passwords, which leads to a very big security vulnerability. So, in some malware whose objective is not basically to crack password, but its objective is to go and do something more in the system, but the way they get installed in the system is by targeting poor password choices. So, it will go and target different admin passwords. If an admin has a very weak password, then the malware gets installed in that system very easily using this weakness, and once it gets installed into one system inside the network, then it can do many things within the network. So, malware whose primary goal is not to crack password actually goes and does a password attack to get administration privileges with which it can do much more damage to the system. The next important problem or next very commonly noticed problem is that people voluntarily disclose their passwords. Sometimes just an authoritative command, I am going to disable your account, there is some problem with your account, there is some transaction which is missing. So, some sort of a intimidative but authoritative statement by a fisher will make people bit worried, and they immediately go and say, okay, this is my password, do not disable, get this run. So, this type of some authoritative statements and some intimidation, people do really get scared and leak the password. There is a very interesting news that comes out from the BBC. There are people who are ready to reveal the password in exchange of a chocolate. There are many instances, even without a chocolate, people would voluntarily share their password. For example, an executive delegates his password to his administrative assistant, and someday his administrative assistant is sick, so the administrative assistant gives to her admin assistant, and so the password never gets changed because now 3 to 4 people know the password. So, this is a voluntary sharing, and it is shared just for convenience. Now, a supervisor can actually call an employee and say, tell the password because I need to access critical file which is very important, and since you are ill you can't come, tell me the password, and normally the subordinate obliges for this. Spouses often will routinely trust each other with their passwords even though they should not. For example, very rarely you can hear a statement from a spouse, sorry dear, though we are married for 25 years, but you simply don't need to know my password. Very wrong, very rarely we get these type of statements. And when your password becomes extremely complex because your system wants such rules, you tend to write these passwords, you put it on a yellow sticky note almost in a notice board, and what happens is that people who visits your office can note this, people who are custodial staff who comes and cleans your office can note this, and the password can leak. But there is one very interesting article, you can go to the web page, Ask the Geek web page, which talk about carrying one's password in one's wallet is probably, or at least marginally, more secure, although it is not ideal. So the article basically describes that if you keep your password in your wallet, then you don't store it anywhere, you don't write it anywhere, and once in 15 years or 10 years a careful person actually loses his wallet or give it to someone, and that probability of you losing the password is much lesser than the probability that somebody hacks into your system where you have stored your password and gets in. So sometimes writing password, people argue that writing password and keeping it in a safe place is much more secure than having it in some electronic form. So another thing is that I do not want to remember the password, so I make my my email client or my web browser to remember the password so that I could automatically log in. This has lot of implications. Implication number one is that when you move away from the system, somebody else can come and log in and start using your system. And they can log in as yourself because you have already stored the password and your system automatically logs in. And why do we store all these passwords? Because it is very difficult for us to remember. There are too many passwords around. Passwords are ubiquitous. So some solutions are suggested for this problem, like you allow the users to store the passwords so that they could automatically log in, but then when they are not near the system, then the system automatically locks, and when they come near the system, near in the sense say less than a meter away from the system where they could clearly see the monitor, then only the system unlocks itself. And this is achieved using some RFID type of card. So there is so one of the interesting solutions is by Zilog. You can go and visit their website, which is called Walkaway Security. So the user actually has a card, and it's like an RF proximity card, and the software is installed in the system. So when the user is near, and it is coupled with the user, so when the user comes near the system unlocks, but when the user moves away from the system locks itself. So though I have made the login and password being stored in the system, so when I log in, you automatically log into the system, my proximity will dictate whether the system should be locked or it should be unlocked. So this is a very interesting solution. Another important problem would be that we tend to share password across multiple sites. One interesting thing is that when I want to forward email from when I want to use the POP for consolidation of email, I have several email accounts, but I want to see the email in one of those accounts, so and send the email through one server. So we use this POP consolidation, and when we do this POP consolidation, we actually give to one of the email clients the password in an unhashed raw form. So if you carefully look into this is the POP email consolidation of Yahoo, and please see that password the one you use to access your other account. So you are giving the password to some site in a completely unhashed raw format. The real password goes there. So this is one another way by which the password is shared. So there are also electronic wallets, keypass.info. Please, you can visit this website. So you just keep these password in these wallets. Right. One example of such a product is KeyPass. Well, this is very convenient as we need not remember the password, but it is something like you are putting all the eggs into one basket. So if the electronic wallet is compromised, then all your passwords are compromised. So there is one very important thing that we need to keep in mind regarding using of a single point of storage for all your confidential information. Passwords necessarily need not be broken. The password can also be sniffed. Sniffed in the sense that when you are entering the password, somebody can find out what the password is. So sniffing is not just on the network, but let us first talk about network. When you log into the internet, the entire internet is not dedicated to you. The internet is available to you in a switched form. There will be many users who are using the internet. So for some milliseconds the internet is given to you, then it is switched to somebody else, and then it is switched to somebody else, and then again in some fashion it will come back to you. So you are when you are using the internet, you are 100% switched. Now when you are 100% switched, how can somebody go and sniff some packet that is originating from you? Sniff in the sense go and find the packets, analyze the packets later and find out the information. This is the entire procedure for sniffing from a network. But how can one sniff if you have 100% switched network? Because you don't know from which packet belongs to whom. But that is not actually the case. If you carefully look at ARP spoofing or MAC flooding, MAC duplication, among other methods, you can actually, there is a good chance that a bad guy or a bad girl can still arrange to see network traffic even in a fully switched environment. In the later courses we will deal about this particular aspect in more detail, but what I suggest now is that you can go and see these websites, the monkey.org and the oxid.it, to get more details about how one can sniff in a 100% switched network. So though your network switched networks, though your network is switched, it does not provide sufficient protection against network traffic being sniffed. The next question comes, we have this virtual private network. Though I am switched, I have the virtual private network, and essentially I am sending data in an encrypted form through this virtual private network. This virtual private network, please understand, does not give you an end-to-end security. If I am a client, I am accessing a server, the encryption does not happen from the outlet of the client till the inlet of the server. Actually the encryption happens from the outlet of the client to the inlet of a VPN concentrator, which will be in the local LAN. After that point, from the VPN concentrator to the server machine, the data goes in an unencrypted form, and that is certainly a vulnerability. As you see in this, the three types of connection, the first connection is a regular connection which is completely unencrypted and people can sniff. The second one is an encrypted VPN connection, a virtual private network, but then the encryption goes only till the VPN concentrator. After the VPN concentrator, though it is inside the LAN, from that point to the server it is still unencrypted. So, one can sniff the data internally. The next solution for it is that we start using SSH or SSL, which gives you an end-to-end encryption. It is excellent if you use SSL TSL, because this certainly minimizes your exposure to sniffing. But this does not solve the problem in total. Though on the network I can stop sniffing by having this SSH and SSL type of protocols, still sniffing can happen locally, and we will give some very interesting examples. Somebody inserts a pen drive to copy some data from your system, and at that point of time you log into your internet to get the data and copy into this pen drive. This pen drive, this USB drive need not just be a simple USB drive, it can be one of those keystroke grabbers, which looks like an USB device in which you can store files, but at the same time it can grab all that you type on a USB keyboard. So, a simple way of getting a password is to come and ask something that something from the internet and say, please copy it on this pen drive, and you insert that pen drive and you go to the internet. When you are going into the internet, your proxy may ask you for a password. Probably at that time you will also log into your Gmail, or you will log into your Facebook, and all the keystrokes that happen from the point of insertion till the point of removal of that USB drive would be captured in that keystroke grabber. Another way by which SSH can fail is that one can have a Trojan SSH or SSHD, the SSH daemon, and this can also leak the password. Though I am doing end-to-end encryption, before the encryption happens I can leak the password. For some details on this, the staccato institutions are very nice examples for this. So, in these two slides what I have tried to convey is that though I have end-to-end encryption by the SSH and SCL protocol, it does not necessarily mean that my password is protected and it is not sniffed. The other thing, which is a very low tech attack, is to just do shoulder surfing. So, when you start entering the data, when a person is logging in, you just go and sniff through his shoulder, or you have a little more high tech would be to have some video cameras which will be watching the keyboards, and very miniaturized video wireless cameras are there, which could be put inside an office workstation keyboards, and one can basically find out what password is being typed by looking at the image. And there are many malware which are targeting passwords, including online banking credentials. So, some of them we have listed like Clampy, Zeus, Coopface, etc. So, today we are speaking of mitigation of password threat, mitigation of sniffing of password. Why isn't everyone doing the right thing and encrypting all the traffic? We could have some access controls by which we may not sniff inside, but at the same time why can't we just go and encrypt that traffic? But the company says, I would love to encrypt, but we just can't, because then I cannot monitor what the user is doing. So, now there is a very important question that we would like to ask before we end this session. What is the bigger risk? If I have a bad guy who is sniffing your password, is it bigger risk, or go and encrypt all the data and but then having an employee who is playing around checking out his favorite team on ESPN. You can't go, and if you go and encrypt, certainly the bad guy cannot sniff your password, but an employee can still go and visit ESPN without your knowledge, because you don't know what he is doing because you have encrypted. On the other hand, if you don't encrypt, a bad guy can sniff your password, but then you can find whether an employee is going to the ESPN site or not. Which one is a bigger risk? It is for you to decide. Thank you.